Dale Carter was a quiet man who loved his peaceful life on the ranch. He had lived there for many years, ever since he inherited the land from his grandfather. The ranch was large, full of green grass, old wooden fences, and animals that roamed freely. There were cows, horses, and chickens. And in the middle of his land, there was a pond. It wasn't a pretty blue pond like you see in travel magazines. No, this pond was muddy and full of waste from the animals. It smelled bad most days, especially when the wind was strong. But Dale didn't mind. He was just part of ranch life. He lived in a small house not far from the pond. Every morning, he would wake up at sunrise, make himself a cup of coffee, and step out onto the porch to look over his land. He enjoyed the quiet sounds of nature, birds chirping, cows mooing, and sometimes the splash of a horse stepping into the water. The ranch was his home, his pride, and his peace. Dale didn't need anything fancy. He wore old jeans, a wide hat to block the sun, and boots that had seen too many dusty days. One Thursday morning, Dale noticed something different. As he looked out toward the road near the edge of his fence, he saw a line of shiny SUVs driving up slowly. They stopped near the pond, where the grass was flat and open. This confused Dale. That area was far from the main road, and it wasn't a place people usually visited. He took his binoculars and looked closely. A group of people started getting out of the cars. They were dressed very differently from Dale. One woman wore a bright white jacket, high-heeled boots, and had a scarf tied around her head. Another man was wearing a sports vest and carrying what looked like a drone camera. There were children, two, running around, laughing and pointing at the horses in the distance. Dale scratched his head and muttered, "What in the world?" Within minutes, the group began setting up what looked like a fancy camping area. They had tall white tents, outdoor rugs, pillows, candles in glass jars, and even a foldable table with flowers in a vase. One of them placed a sign that said Weekend Nature Retreat. Dale raised an eyebrow. Nature retreat? He said aloud, looking toward the pond. That pond wasn't what they thought it was. It wasn't for swimming or relaxing. It was full of runoff water from the fields where the cows and horses often stood and did their business. The smell alone was enough to keep most people far away. But the visitors didn't seem to notice or care. They were smiling, taking selfies, and setting up yoga mats near the water's edge. Decided to walk down and see what was going on. As he approached slowly, one of the women turned around and smiled. "Oh, hello," she said cheerfully. "Is this your land?"
"Oh, yeah."
"Yes, ma'am," Dale replied calmly. "Been in my family for 3 generations. How wonderful," she said. "We're from the Willow Creek HOA, just over those hills. We're doing a little weekend glamping experience. You don't mind, do you?" Dale looked at her, then looked at the others laughing and sipping sparkling water near the pond. "Well, I don't mind folks enjoying nature," he said. "But I reckon that pond ain't exactly what you think it is." She laughed lightly. "Oh, it's so peaceful. The reflections are amazing. We might even do paddle yoga on it tomorrow." Dale gave a small nod, but didn't say much else. He figured they'd find out soon enough. Didn't want to embarrass them, but he also didn't want to waste his breath. Sometimes life teaches lessons better than words can. He walked back to his porch, sat in his wooden chair, and took a slow sip of coffee. From his seat, he could still see them, setting up lanterns, hammocks, and cooking gear. Played soft music from a speaker. It was like watching a city come to the country, trying hard to look rustic, but missing the whole point. As the sun began to lower, the group started their dinner by the pond. Someone lit a small fire pit and toasted marshmallows. Dale noticed a little boy running too close to the muddy water. He fell and got his hands dirty. The adults laughed. Thinking it was part of the fun, Dale just shook his head. He knew that boy would be washing his hands for days to get that smell off. That night, the wind changed direction. Dale knew what that meant. The smell from the pond would drift right into their campsite. And as it always did in the evenings, the bugs would start to come out. Mosquitoes, flies, and little gnats that loved to hang around wet areas. Dale went inside and closed his windows. He didn't want to hear them screaming or complaining. He just wanted to enjoy his quiet night. but part of him was curious. Couldn't wait to see how long they would last. As he lay in bed, he chuckled softly to himself. He wasn't mad at them. Maybe they were just looking for a break from their busy lives. But they had no idea what real ranch life was. It wasn't clean or quiet or fancy. It was dirty, smelly, and honest. And that pond full of bull and horse waste was the truest part of it all. Next morning, Dale woke up early. As always, the sky was still dark, and the air was cool. Made his coffee, and stepped outside onto his porch. Could hear the cows in the distance, and the soft splash of a horse stepping into the pond. But something else caught his ear. Laughter, loud talking, and the sound of someone playing music from a speaker. He looked over at the pond. The HOA group was already awake. Some were stretching on yoga mats, while others were walking around, holding mugs of what looked like herbal tea. Marla, the woman who had spoken to him yesterday, was leading the group with a big smile on her face. Marla stood near the pond with her hands raised and said loudly, "Let's take a deep breath and enjoy this natural beauty." The group followed her, closing their eyes and breathing in. But after just a moment, a few of them opened their eyes quickly and looked around, sniffing the air. Something didn't smell right. Dale smiled quietly from his porch. Marla tried to keep the mood positive. "It's just that fresh farm scent," she said. "Earthy and raw. That's how you know it's real." The others nodded, but their faces didn't look convinced. As the day went on, the group tried their best to enjoy the countryside retreat. They brought out fruit platters, tiny, sandwiches, and green smoothies. One man set up a tripod with a camera and started recording a video. "Out here in nature," he said into the camera, "you can really feel the connection to the earth." Behind him, a horse walked by and dropped a large pile of waste near the pond. Children ran around chasing bugs and playing near the water. A woman laid down a soft blanket and opened a book. Everything looked perfect until one of the kids picked up a stick and poked the water. Thick bubbles rose up from the muddy pond, followed by a smell that made everyone stop and turn. "Ow. Is that?" someone asked. Marla tried to ignore it. "It's probably just some natural gases from the pond floor," she said quickly. "Let's not let that ruin the moment." But the moment was already ruined. The wind picked up, and the smell grew stronger. One of the women started coughing and moved her mat away from the water. A man covered his nose with a napkin. Another. Family quietly started packing their picnic. Dale watched the whole thing unfold from a distance. He wasn't laughing. He wasn't angry either. He was just amazed at how little these folks understood about the land they were camping on. Later that afternoon, Marla walked up to Dale's porch. She was wearing big sunglasses and a hat, and her smile looked a little forced. "Good morning again, Mr. Carter," she said. "Morning," Dale replied. "I just wanted to ask a little more about the pond," she said, trying to sound cheerful. "Is it fed by a spring, or is it natural rainfall?" Dale looked at her. "It's mostly runoff from the barns and fields," he said plainly. "The cows and horses walk through it all the time. That water's not clean. It's mostly waste." "And mud?" Marla's smile disappeared. "I thought it was a natural lake or something." "No, ma'am," Dale said kindly. "That's why I tried to tell you yesterday. It's not meant for swimming or relaxing near. That water ain't healthy. It's for the animals, and even they know not to drink too much of it." Marla nodded. Slowly, clearly embarrassed. "I guess we just assumed. The view was so beautiful, and we thought it would be the perfect spot for a peaceful escape." "I understand," Dale said. "But the countryside isn't always what people think. It can be pretty to look at, but it's got its smells, its sounds, and its mess, too." Marla thanked him and returned to the camp. But by now, the mood had changed. People were sitting quietly or complaining in low voices. A woman said she had bites all over her legs from bugs. A man said he couldn't stop sneezing. Another kid said the pond smelled like a bathroom. Around sunset, they tried to have a group dinner. They lit candles and played music again, trying to bring back the joy. But the bugs came out stronger this time. Mosquitoes swarmed the lanterns. Moths flew into their drinks. One man accidentally stepped in a soft patch of mud and lost his shoe. Then it started to drizzle. The sky turned gray, and a soft rain began to fall. The fancy picnic blankets got wet. The rugs soaked through. People ran for their tents, which were not built for real country rain. Water started to seep inside, and their pillows and clothes got damp. Marla stood under a small umbrella, trying to act like everything was still fine. It's just a little weather, she called out, adds to the adventure. But Dale could see it. They were tired, wet, and ready to go home. Back in his house, Dale dried off his boots and sat down at the table. He looked out the window. The pond shimmered in the rain, brown and still. The campers were trying to sleep, but the noises of frogs, crickets, and the occasional cow made it difficult. That night, Dale thought about how different people saw the same land in different ways. To him, that pond was useful, even if it looked messy. To the HOA group, it was something to decorate and take pictures of. But nature didn't care about appearances. It just was what it was, honest, dirty, and real. And tomorrow he knew they'd start realizing the truth about their perfect weekend escape, you said. Part 3 KO expand KRO without heading 1,300 words my and simple. ChatGPT said. By early morning, Dale was already up, as usual. The sky was still dark, but he could tell the storm clouds had passed. The rain had stopped sometime during the night, but it had left behind thick mud and a heavy smell in the air. He made his coffee and stepped outside onto his porch. The ground was wet, and the wind carried the strong scent from the pond, even more powerful now because of the fresh rain. He looked across the field toward the fancy tents. They looked different now. The once bright fabric was dirty and drooping. The rugs were soaked. Some were folded up and placed to the side, already ruined. A few chairs had sunk into the wet ground. It was quiet over there, too quiet. Dale could see someone standing outside. One of the tents. It was the man with the drone camera. He was barefoot and holding his shoes in his hands, both covered in mud. He looked around, confused and tired. Then, one by one, the other campers came out. Their hair was messy, their clothes damp, and their expressions showed no joy, only regret and discomfort. A little boy cried because he couldn't find his favorite toy. A woman shouted, "There are ants all over my bag." Another man stood silently, looking down at the water, probably wondering why it smelled worse today than it did yesterday. Marla, the HOA president, came out last. She tried to smile and say, "Good morning, everyone." But her voice was weak. Nobody responded. She tried again. "Let's make the best of it. We'll have a beautiful breakfast and do one more yoga session before we pack up." No one moved. A woman whispered to another, "I just want to go home. I'm trying to stay." Positive Marla took a deep breath and walked toward the edge of the pond. She pulled out her phone to record a short video. She smiled into the camera and began. Nothing like fresh country air after a night of rain. Then she stepped on a slippery patch near the pond, and her foot slid right into a deep puddle of brown, mushy mud. She lost her balance and fell, sideways, dropping her phone. Gasps came from the group. Someone ran to help her, but their foot also sank. Dale, watching from his porch, stood up and shook his head. He walked down the hill slowly, not in a rush, but knowing he should check on them. By the time he reached them, Marla was sitting on a folding chair with a towel wrapped around her legs. Her shoes were ruined, her phone screen cracked, and the group had gathered in a circle, all looking tired and frustrated. "I'm sorry," she said softly, facing them. "I didn't know the land was like this. I thought it would be a peaceful place for us to rest and connect. I didn't understand what this pond really was." Dale finally spoke. "It's all right, ma'am. You didn't know. The pond's been like that for years. It's mostly for the cattle and horses. It collects wastewater and rain. It smells bad. Looks worse after a storm. But it does what it's supposed to," one man asked. "Why didn't anyone tell us? Why isn't there a sign?" Dale gave a little smile. "Most folks around here already know it's just part of the land. There's no need for signs when you understand the land you're walking on." Marla nodded. "We didn't understand. We came here thinking it was like a park, but we didn't ask questions. We just assumed," another woman added. "I thought the countryside would be calm and quiet. I didn't expect this." Dale looked around at the group. "Country life ain't always peaceful. It's real, though. It's animals, smells, storms, mud. It's part of the deal." Gotta respect it, not dress it up like a photo shoot. There was silence for a moment. Then Marla stood up, wiping her hands. We're going to pack up, she said. We're not meant to be here like this. But thank you, Mr. Carter, for not being angry, for being kind. Dale nodded. Sometimes people have to walk through a bit of mess to understand where they are. No harm done. The group began taking down their tents and folding up what they could. Most of their gear was too wet or dirty to save. Dale offered them a long garden hose so they could rinse their shoes and bags. He even brought out a few old towels from his shed. As they worked, the mood slowly became lighter. The kids stopped crying, and some people even began to laugh quietly about their wild night. One man said, "This is going to make a great story later. I can already hear my wife's voice when I tell her I slept next to a manure pond." Marla chuckled. "This is not going on our HOA Instagram page, that's for sure." Dale smiled. Then said, "Next time you want to visit the countryside, just give me a call. I'll show you the clean side of the ranch and the messy side too." As the last SUV pulled away from the muddy field, Dale stood beside the pond. The wind carried the usual smell, but to him, it didn't bother one bit. He looked out across the land, the sun now rising higher in the sky. The pond was still muddy, still smelly, and still full of bull and horse waste. But now there was a story behind it, one that none of those visitors would ever forget. In Dale, he was just glad they finally saw the truth. The morning sun started to climb above the hills, warming the muddy field and shining down on the tired group of campers. Dale stood quietly by his fence, sipping his coffee and watching as the HOA members tried to rescue their belongings. Of their sleeping bags and blankets were damp, some even stained with brownish mud from the pond's edge. Even their fancy lanterns and picnic baskets looked out of place in the mess left behind by last night's rain. Ala walked slowly around the site, trying to organize her group. She did her best to stay strong, giving out soft instructions, but it was clear she felt embarrassed. Her voice had lost its cheerful excitement. Instead, she sounded tired and almost sorry for bringing everyone out here. She waved to Dale from a distance, and he gave her a polite nod, understanding her situation without saying a word. Campers tried to brush the dirt off their shoes and mats. One woman sat down and quietly started crying as she pulled leeches from her ankle. Another man tried to scoop mud out of his car with a cup, frowning as he worked. The children, who were so excited the day before, now looked bored and wanted to go home. Their shoes squished with every step, and their hair was tangled and full of little leaves and grass. Dale decided to check on the group up close. He walked down to the pond, his boots making deep prints in the soft earth. Marla met him at the edge, looking apologetic. "I'm sorry, Mr. Carter," she said in a gentle voice. "Should have listened when you warned us. We just wanted a little adventure, but I didn't know it would be this hard." Dale gave a kind smile. "It's all right. Sometimes the best way to learn about a place is to see it for yourself. This land has been in my family a long time. It's not always pretty, but it's honest." Marla nodded and lowered her eyes. "We've all learned something, that's for sure." As they spoke, another SUV tried to drive away from the field, but the tires spun and the car got stuck in the muddy ground. The driver pressed the gas, making the wheels sink deeper, throwing mud onto the windows. Several people ran to help, but the car only went deeper into the muck. Dale walked over to the barn and brought out his old red tractor. He hitched a tow rope to the stuck SUV and slowly, carefully, pulled it back onto the gravel road. The campers cheered and clapped, some even laughing at how city folks like themselves needed a real farmer to get them out of trouble. As Marla helped Dale coil up the tow rope, she sighed. "I thought coming out here would give us all a little break from city life. Instead, I feel like I ruined everyone's weekend." Dale shook his head gently. "You didn't ruin anything. You just gave your friends a real story to tell. And now you know, if you want to spend time on the land, you have to understand it first." Marla looked at the pond, then back at Dale. "I really had no idea. I just saw the open space, the pretty water, the green grass. I didn't think about where the water came from or what was in it. I didn't know ponds could be for animals, not people." Dale nodded. "A lot of folks don't, That pond is where the rain and all the water from the barnyard runs to. The cows and horses walk through it, and it collects what they leave behind. It helps keep the rest of the land cleaner. Can't swim in it, and you sure don't want to drink from it. But it's important. Marla listened carefully. She seemed truly interested, not just embarrassed now, but curious. So, if someone wanted to enjoy the ranch, what's the right way to do it? Dale thought for a moment. Start with a walk. Watch the sunrise. Listen to the animals. Smell the hay in the barn, not the pond. There's beauty here, but it's not always easy to find if you're just looking for a picture. He paused, looking at the campers as they packed up. It's easy to fall in love with the idea of country life, but real country life is hard work, patience, and respect for nature. Marla smiled for the first time that morning. Thank you for helping us, and for not making fun of us. Dale smiled back. We all have to learn, one way or another. As the group finished cleaning up, several campers came over to shake Dale's hand and thank him. A man in muddy pants grinned. I've learned more about country living in one weekend than I have in my whole life. Next time, I'll ask before setting up camp anywhere. A woman laughed. My shoes are ruined, but at least I know now what a real pond smells like. Dale chuckled with them, feeling the mood lighten. The children climbed into the cars, tired but quiet. The adults took last looks at the ranch, seeing it with new eyes, not just as a pretty place, but as real living land. Before she left, Marla handed Dale a folded piece of paper. It's just a small thank you, in my way of saying sorry. Dale opened it later and saw it was a note of apology, signed by every member of the group. Alongside the note was a little card for a free pie from the bakery in town. Dale smiled. It wasn't much, but it meant they truly understood what had happened. As the cars drove away, leaving behind muddy tire tracks and trampled grass, Dale stood by his pond and watched the dust settle. He felt proud, not because the group had failed at their fancy camp, but because they had learned something important. The ranch was still his, messy and beautiful. And now, maybe, those city folks would remember not just the dirt and the smell, but also the lesson in humility and respect for the land. Dale went back to his porch, poured himself another cup of coffee, and looked out at the pond. The horses wandered over for a drink, and the cows gathered under a shady tree. Life on the ranch was back to normal, and Dale was grateful for it. He knew that sometimes people need to see things for themselves to really understand. And sometimes a weekend of mud and mistakes is the best teacher of all. A few days after the big adventure, the ranch was quiet again. The grass near the pond had been pressed flat by many footsteps, but it was already starting to stand up straight. The muddy spots were drying under the warm Texas sun. Dale enjoyed these peaceful mornings, sitting on his porch with a cup of coffee, listening to the gentle sounds of the ranch. He watched his cows graze, his horses wander, and the birds fly across the open sky. The pond, muddy and still, glistened in the sunlight. It looked the same as it always had, but now Dale knew it had a new story to tell. Later that week, the mailman drove up and handed Dale a package and a letter. Dale took them inside, curious about what could be inside. The letter had a fancy return address. It was from the Willow Creek HOA. Inside, there was a neatly folded handwritten note. It read, Dear Mr. Carter, we want to thank you for your kindness and patience last weekend. We apologize for causing trouble on your land. We didn't know what we were getting into, and we learned a lot from the experience. Thank you for helping us out and for not making us feel foolish. We're grateful for the lesson in respecting nature and the hard work of ranchers. Sincerely, Marla and the Willow Creek HOA group. Dale smiled as he read the note. It was honest and heartfelt. He opened the package and found a small basket filled with homemade cookies and jars of strawberry jam. There was also a gift card for the local bakery, the same one Marla had mentioned before. The gesture made Dale's day brighter. He felt glad that the group had taken the time to say thank you. It was rare these days to receive such a thoughtful gift after such a messy weekend. A few days later, as Dale was fixing a fence near the barn, he saw a car pulling slowly up the driveway. It was Marla, but this time she was dressed very differently. She wore jeans, old sneakers, and a wide hat to block the sun, clothes made for working on a ranch. She waved shyly as she got out. "Morning, Mr. Carter," she said. "Hoping you'd show me a little about life on the ranch. Real life, not just the pretty parts." Dale grinned. "Of course. There's plenty to learn, and I could use an extra pair of hands." They spent the day together, walking through the fields, feeding the horses, and cleaning out the barn. Marla learned how to carry a bucket without spilling, how to brush a horse without startling it, and how to check a fence for loose wires. Dale told stories about his grandfather, about long summers, and about learning to respect the land. Marla listened closely, asked questions, never complained about the mud or the smell. As the afternoon sun grew hot, they took a break under a shady tree. Marla looked out at the pond. "You know," she said, "I never thought I'd be grateful for a muddy pond. But I think I understand now. This place isn't just beautiful, it's alive. You have to work with it, not against it." Dale nodded. "You've got it. The land isn't here for decoration. It takes care of us if we take care of it." Word spread about Marla's visit. Soon a few more members of the HOA called Dale, asking if they could come and learn about ranch life too. Dale agreed, happy to share his knowledge with anyone willing to listen. He didn't mind teaching city folks as long as they came with open minds and good attitudes. On Saturdays, Dale began to host little ranch tours for curious neighbors. He showed them how to care for animals, where to plant trees, and how to fix a broken gate. He let the children gather eggs from the chicken coop, and sometimes they even helped feed the cows. Everyone learned to watch where they stepped around the pond. Over time, Dale and the Willow Creek community built a new kind of friendship. Instead of seeing each other as strangers divided by a fence, they became neighbors who respected and understood each other.
Ow.
The city folks brought fresh bread and pies, while Dale shared his vegetables and homemade pickles. They laughed about the infamous muddy pond weekend and told stories around the fire pit on cool evenings. Marla changed too. She stopped trying to make everything perfect for social media. She started to enjoy the quiet moments, the real smiles, and the feeling of dirt under her fingernails. She told Dale, "I never knew what I was missing until I saw how you live." Dale was happy, not because people praised him, but because he saw people learning and growing. The ranch stayed the same. The pond was still muddy, the barn still creaked, and the animals still made noise. The spirit of the place had spread. People started to understand that real life was about more than pictures and decorations. It was about respect, hard work, and the willingness to learn from mistakes. And so, what began as a messy, uncomfortable weekend for the HOA group became the beginning of a new chapter for everyone. Marla and her friends no longer saw the ranch as just a pretty place to visit. They saw it as a place where stories were made, lessons were learned, friendships grew strong. Dale looked out over his land each morning, grateful for his peaceful life and for the unexpected guests who taught him that sometimes opening your gates just a little can bring the best kind of change. The muddy pond had given everyone a lesson they would never forget, and Dale knew that sometimes the things that look the messiest on the outside have the most to offer on the inside.